If you think that Homelander on Amazon Prime's The Boys is a terrible person, imagine what he's like in a medium without a standards and practices department. Homelander has been the embodiment of the notion that absolute power corrupts absolutely. He is what happens if someone like Superman isn't raised by morally upstanding farmers from Kansas. Characters all go through a transformation going from page to screen, but what remains is this fundamental truth of the characters. Homelander is just the worst. Here's the difference between a character running on pure Garth Ennis versus a live-action adaptation.
I'm really glad you're here.
In the world of The Boys, the development of a serum that gives people powers wasn't lost, and even worse, it was the product of a corporation. That means that most of the heroes are the product of unethical science experiments. Now that's true for both live-action Homelander and comic book Homelander. The divergence happens in how that experiment came about. Both were an attempt to make the most powerful superhero ever. For the comics, he was the first and ultimate result. For the show, Homelander was created with DNA from the previous attempt at the perfect soup, Soldier Boy. But that doesn't mean that comic book Homelander is free from the whole clone issue. Now, since it's The Boys, naturally this turns out to be a terrible idea.
I'm the upgrade.
The clone of Homelander doesn't just sit in a tube of undefined sci-fi liquid waiting to be activated. Instead, he's running around as a check on Homelander in the guise of Black Noir. Turns out, being the wind beneath someone's wings is boring. Instead, he undermines Homelander to hasten becoming his replacement, including Black Noir posing as Homelander to attack Butcher's wife. Now, Season 3 ends on another instance of Homelander becoming even worse than he was in the season before. This time, he upped the ante by punching through Black Noir for not telling Homelander that he was the scientific offspring of Soldier Boy. Since he was raised as a science experiment, he had no family at all, so even though Soldier Boy is also just the worst, he feels like he was robbed of that one normal aspect of existing, having a parent.
You should have told me.
It's also used to demonstrate to the remaining members of the Seven that he is in charge, and when he says that he's better than everyone, he means everyone, including the Seven. It's a pretty dramatic end for a character who everyone, including Homelander, was a little bit afraid of. In the show, killing Noir is as easy as killing everyone else. Now, we already know that wouldn't be the case in the comics. In fact, the roles are reversed. When Black Noir's attempts to frame Homelander don't work out as planned, Noir just skips straight to the end and kills Homelander after the Supes are involved in killing the Vice President. Some things in the comics we knew were gonna have to go through some translation before being streamed into people's living rooms. One of the biggest is the event known as Herogasm, the annual all-soup super orgy. Now in the show, it was a running thing for what were characterized as C-list soups to be as debauched as they want, but is looked down on by the A-list superhero community. In the comics, it's closer to hedonism, an attempt to create a weekend where adult film logic is real. Instead of attracting just the C-listers no one cares about, the comic book Herogasm attracts everyone to a remote island and has more of a purge vibe where nothing they do is forbidden. While Soldier Boy and Homelander square off at the Herogasm from the show for their first throwdown,
You think you look strong?
in the comics, Soldier Boy attends Herogasm to get close to Homelander in the hopes that he'll make his way onto the Seven. Now, the premise of The Boys is that they are a team of operatives who all have a reason to mistrust Supes to act as a control on their activity. Even with members of The Boys having power, they really don't stand a chance against the Supes in a head-to-head fight. Now that means that the Boys usually resort to more underhanded things like blackmail, since the Supes' only real weakness is a desire to be liked by the public.
I'd prefer to be loved.
On the power side, the Vought of the comics had the Homelander clone that was posing as Black Noir. Now in the series, Vought finds themselves in a bind. They don't have a Homelander safety valve. Believing that Soldier Boy was killed, the boys go looking for the weapon that did it. There was no weapon, but thanks to even more experimentation, Soldier Boy has become that weapon.
We're onto something that could kill Homelander.
What is it?
Some kind of weapon,
He's strong enough to hold his own against Homelander, but the only way to truly beat him is to take his powers. Unfortunately, even Butcher has limits, and that weapon went down with Maeve before he could take down Homelander. Now the live-action Homelander has literally no equal.
I'm the world's greatest superhero.
That limit that Butcher reached was not allowing Soldier Boy's power-zapping blast to hit Homelander because the ensuing blast would also take out Ryan. No, not the Ryan from pitch meetings or the writer for the script, but the Ryan that is the result of Homelander's assault on Butcher's wife. When Butcher finds out that his wife is alive and she has a child, he promises to protect him as his last connection to his wife. And of course, because he has Homelander's powers and that if he ends up being raised by Homelander, well, no good can come of that. Keeping Ryan out of the hands of Homelander has been a driving part of the narrative of the series, as the young protege has gone from choosing Butcher to choosing Homelander, who ends the third season taking full custody of young Ryan and training him in the ways of doing whatever he wants to do.
Son, we can do anything we want.
That's a lot more of a life than his comic book counterpart had. In fact, he didn't even make it far enough to get a name. His powers manifest while still in the womb and ends up killing his mom in the process. Before the kid can grow up to do even worse things on purpose, Butcher kills him on the spot. The drama of the series and the books are relatively the same. Wide-eyed, innocent Huey's girlfriend is killed by unchecked supes, and wide-eyed, innocent Starlight is inducted into the world of A-list superheroes in a very not A-list fashion. It's in the Starlight storyline where there's a big change from the comics. In the TV show, The Deep gives Starlight her wildly inappropriate initiation into the Seven, and it's not something that Starlight feels inclined to be silent about. The result is The Deep being sent on a PR-driven journey, not so much of redemption, but the appearance of redemption, as he tries to rehabilitate his image and find his way back onto the Seven. His return punctuates Starlight's deepening understanding of just how corrupt and amoral the whole structure is, and how it traps the people within it to either be as debauched or have the debauchery and lack of consequences slowly eat you from the inside. It's the feel-good hit of the year. Her situation in the comics is so much worse. Not only is the image-conscious Homelander not there to at least give the appearance of doing something about that kind of behavior, he is that kind of behavior. Rather than the Deep, the initiation is done by Black Noir, A-Train, and Homelander himself. As a result, it takes longer for Starlight to find her confidence to stand up to the supes. Instead of the event resulting in at least the appearances of accountability, it's used by Butcher to drive a wedge between Starlight and Huey. One thing that hasn't changed between Homelander of the comics and Homelander of the show is Homelander's terrible upbringing. The Kal-El-esque cover story of Homelander falling to Earth is all a cover for Vought raising the future nightmare in a current complete nightmare. For the series, it's shown that as a child, young Homelander was subjected to a series of tests and experiments that would shake even Snitter and Ralph. Between doing horrible things like putting his hand in a fire, getting boiled, and having his strength tested by sending in enhanced guards to fight him, he would spend his time staring at a series of images they hoped would guide the principles he never actually developed. Instead, he just learned all the things that the people he needed to love him like. Any sort of human connection or anything resembling love was undone, often by himself not knowing the limits of his own strength.
Want them to love me.
Yahtzee!
Now all of that sounds really awful, but the comic book does it all one better. Knowing that they were raising a weapon of mass destruction, they had a bit of a contingency. Strapping a weapon of mass destruction on his back, just in case. Homelander checks all the Superman boxes. He's faster than speeding bullets, which he's also invulnerable to. He can fly, and he makes heavy use of his heat vision laser eyes. I mean, if you have laser eyes, why even break a sweat? In the comics, he has one more power that hasn't managed to be demonstrated in the show. He can scream so powerfully that it can rupture people's eardrums. Growing up being experimented on with no one even pretending to care, like Papa from Stranger Things, Homelander has no real model for what love even looks like. Both comic book and live-action Homelander have a past relationship with Queen Maeve that doesn't work out, but live-action Homelander gives love a few more disastrous goes. First is the relationship he had with Madeline Stillwell that's part lover, part mother, and all kinds of wrong. Just like with Noir, when he finds out what she was withholding from him, he puts an end to Stillwell. When a seemingly new supe comes along to the Seven, he finds someone who is not only as narcissistic and amoral as he is, she can also withstand Homelander without him having to be careful not to break her. He's so taken by that connection that he becomes unbothered after finding out that she dates back to World War II as part of the bad guys and carries their rather pronounced prejudices. Seeing as Homelander sees everyone not him beneath him, specificity doesn't really bother him when it comes to hate. Now, that's not to say that comic book Homelander lives a monkish lifestyle. In addition to his involvement in the initiation, Homelander of the comics is willing to take affection from where it comes from. Whether or not this is a difference between the comics and the show remains to be seen. There's a pattern with dropping "the" from names. The "the" in Homelander's original name is dropped in the same way that Sean Parker convinces Zuckerberg to drop the "the" from Facebook.